Leavitt was not the kind of man who liked surprises. He lived his life in neat, predictable patterns, always on time, always prepared, and always polite. A middle-aged accountant from Ohio with thinning hair and a penchant for wearing muted suits, Leavitt had built his career around precision. His annual business trip to New York City was no exception. Every year, he stayed at the Grandview Hotel, a luxurious establishment known for its elegant interiors, attentive staff, and prime location in Midtown Manhattan. It wasn't just a hotel. It was part of his routine, a small slice of comfort amid the chaos of the city. This year was no different. Weeks before his arrival, Leavitt had meticulously booked his room online, double-checking every detail: check-in date, room type, even the view he preferred. He liked rooms facing west so he could watch the sunset over the Hudson River. Satisfied that everything was in order, he packed his suitcase, carefully folding his shirts and placing them side by side, along with his neatly stacked notebooks and pens. Traveling made him anxious, but knowing that his accommodations were secure gave him a sense of calm. On the morning of his arrival, Leavitt stepped out of the taxi, clutching his briefcase tightly as he gazed up at the towering building. The Grandview never failed to impress him. Its gleaming glass facade reflected the sunlight, and the revolving doors seemed to beckon visitors into a world of sophistication. As he entered the lobby, he noticed the familiar scent of polished wood and fresh flowers mingling with the faint hum of conversation. Business people chatted quietly near the lounge area, while bellhops darted about, assisting guests with their luggage. At the front desk stood Clara, the receptionist assigned to check him in. Clara was quite the opposite of Leavitt in almost every way. Where he was reserved and methodical, she was lively and outspoken. In her mid-30s, Clara prided herself on being progressive and forward-thinking. She often wore colorful scarves draped loosely around her neck, paired with outfits that struck a balance between professional and quirky. Her dark curls framed her face, giving her an approachable appearance, though her sharp wit sometimes caught people off guard. Clara greeted Leavitt with a warm smile. "Good morning, sir. Welcome to the Grandview Hotel," she said cheerfully, typing away on her computer. "Let me pull up your reservation." Leavitt nodded politely, setting his briefcase down on the counter. "Thank you. I'm here for my usual stay, a standard king room with a west-facing view." Clara scanned the screen, nodding as she found his booking. "Ah, yes, Mr. Leavitt. Everything looks good here. Just one moment while I finalize your check-in." She handed him the tablet to sign the digital form, all the while chatting amiably about the weather and how lovely the sunsets were this time of year. Unbeknownst to Leavitt, however, Clara's day was about to take an unexpected turn. As she handed him his keycard and wished him a pleasant stay, the phone beside her rang. Picking it up, she answered with her usual enthusiasm, but within seconds, her expression shifted. On the other end of the line was Robert De Niro's assistant, calling directly from the actor's production company. They needed a last-minute reservation for De Niro himself, who would be arriving later that evening. The problem? The hotel was fully booked. Clara listened intently, tapping her pen against the desk as she considered the situation. This wasn't the first time a celebrity had requested a room at the Grandview, but such requests usually came through official channels well in advance. Still, accommodating someone like De Niro was a big deal, not only because he was a legendary figure in Hollywood, but also because high-profile guests brought prestige to the hotel. Clara felt a jolt of excitement mixed with responsibility. Surely, she thought, there must be a way to make this work. Her eyes darted across the screen, scanning the list of current bookings. Most of the rooms were occupied, but then she spotted Leavitt's name. He had only just checked in, which meant there was still time to reassign him to another room, or perhaps even persuade him to downgrade his stay. After all, celebrities deserved special treatment, didn't they? And besides, Leavitt seemed like the kind of person who wouldn't mind making a small sacrifice for the greater good. Without hesitation, Clara picked up the phone again and called housekeeping to confirm that Leavitt hadn't yet settled into his room. When they assured her that his bags were still waiting to be delivered, she made her decision. With a few swift clicks, she canceled Leavitt's reservation and reassigned the room to De Niro. To her, it felt like a bold move. a necessary adjustment, to ensure the hotel maintained its reputation for excellence. What Clara didn't realize, however, was that her actions would set off a chain of events far beyond what she could have anticipated. For now, though, she leaned back in her chair, feeling a strange mix of pride and satisfaction. She had done what she believed was best, prioritizing someone she deemed more important. Little did she know, Leavitt was about to return to the front desk, and when he did, things would get complicated. As the hours ticked by, the lobby buzzed with activity. Guests came and went, each carrying their own stories and secrets. Clara continued her duties, unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. Somewhere upstairs, Leavitt unpacked his belongings, blissfully ignorant of the fact that his carefully planned stay was about to unravel. And somewhere else entirely, Robert De Niro prepared for his arrival, oblivious to the drama unfolding in his name. The stage was set, and the players were in motion. All it would take was one misstep to send everything spiraling out of control. Leavitt had spent the better part of his afternoon attending back-to-back meetings in a sleek conference room downtown. The sessions were long and tedious, filled with PowerPoint presentations and endless discussions about quarterly projections. By the time he returned to the Grandview Hotel, the sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the city skyline. Exhausted but relieved to be done for the day, Leavitt stepped into the elevator, eager to retreat to the comfort of his room. He planned to freshen up, order room service, and perhaps sit by the window to watch the sunset, a small ritual that always helped him unwind after a hectic day. When the elevator doors opened on his floor, Leavitt walked briskly down the hallway, keycard in hand. But as he approached his door and slid the card into the slot, the little red light blinked stubbornly instead of turning green. Frowning, he tried again, pressing the card firmly against the reader. Still nothing. Thinking it might be a technical glitch, he repeated the process a third time, but the result was the same. His frustration grew as he realized something was wrong. He retraced his steps back to the elevator, feeling a mix of confusion and irritation. This wasn't how his evening was supposed to go. When he reached the lobby, he spotted Clara at the front desk, chatting animatedly with another guest. Her bright scarf caught his eye as she gestured enthusiastically, clearly engrossed in whatever story she was telling. Leavitt cleared his throat softly to get her attention, and when she finally turned to face him, her smile faltered slightly. "Good evening, Mr. Leavitt," she said, her tone still friendly but tinged with an edge of nervousness. "Is everything all right?" "I'm not sure," Leavitt replied, holding up his keycard. "It seems my room isn't working. I just checked in a few hours ago, so I'm a bit confused." Clara's expression shifted as she glanced at her computer screen. For a brief moment, she hesitated, her fingers hovering over the keyboard before she began typing. Leavitt watched her closely, noting the flicker of unease that crossed her face. Finally, she looked up, forcing a polite smile. Yes, Mr. Leavitt. About your room." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "There's been a slight change. You see, we received a very important request earlier today, a last-minute booking from someone who absolutely needed accommodation, and unfortunately we had to reassign your room to them." Leavitt blinked, taken aback. "Reassign my room? To whom?" Clara hesitated again, clearly debating how much to reveal. Then, with a mixture of pride and defensiveness, she added, "It's Robert De Niro. He's staying with us tonight, and given his status, we felt it was necessary to prioritize his reservation." The name hung in the air between them, heavy and unexpected. Leavitt stared at her, momentarily speechless. He wasn't particularly starstruck by celebrities. His life revolved around numbers and spreadsheets, not Hollywood gossip. But the audacity of the situation left him stunned. "So you're telling me," he said slowly, his voice calm but laced with disbelief, "that you canceled my reservation for a room I booked weeks ago to give it to someone else? Without even asking me first?" Clara nodded, though her confidence seemed to waver under his steady gaze. "Yes, sir, but please understand, it's Robert De Niro. He's an icon. We couldn't turn him away, and besides, we can certainly find you another room or upgrade you if needed." Leavitt raised an eyebrow, unimpressed by her justification. I appreciate the offer, but this isn't about upgrades or finding alternatives. It's about respect. I followed the rules, made my reservation ahead of time, and showed up expecting to stay in the room I paid for. Instead, I'm being treated like an inconvenience because someone famous decided to drop by unannounced. Clara opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again, unsure of what to say. She hadn't anticipated such a strong reaction. Most people, she reasoned, would jump at the chance to make way for a celebrity. Surely Leavitt could see the bigger picture here. Determined to defend her decision, she leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice as if sharing a secret. Look, Mr. Leavitt, I know it's frustrating, but think about it. Having someone like Niro stay here is huge for the hotel. It puts us in the spotlight, brings attention to our brand. Doesn't that count for something? Leavitt sighed, shaking his head. I'm sorry, miss. He trailed off, waiting for her to supply her name. Clara, she said quickly. Clara Bennett. Miss Bennett, he continued. I understand the appeal of hosting a celebrity, but businesses are built on trust and fairness. If you start breaking promises to some guests while favoring others, where does that leave the rest of us? What happens next time someone more important comes along? Do they get bumped too? Clara frowned, stung by his criticism. She prided herself on being fair-minded, yet here she was being accused of exactly the opposite. Before she could respond, however, another guest approached the desk, interrupting their conversation. It was an older man wearing a tailored suit, his demeanor exuding wealth and authority. He greeted Clara warmly, calling her by name and complimenting her scarf. As they exchanged pleasantries, Leavitt noticed the subtle shift in Clara's demeanor. Her posture straightened, and her smile became broader, almost reverential. Curious, Leavitt lingered nearby, pretending to check his phone while eavesdropping on their exchange. The man mentioned something about a recent business trip to Silicon Valley, and Clara chimed in enthusiastically, saying, "Oh, Ethan will love hearing about that. He's always talking about tech startups and innovation." Ethan? Leavitt's ears perked up. Who was Ethan? The man laughed, patting Clara affectionately on the shoulder. You'll have to tell him I said hello. Give my regards to your husband. He's doing incredible work with his company. Husband? Leavitt's eyes widened slightly. So Clara was married, and to someone involved in the tech industry, no less. He filed the information away, sensing it might prove useful later. For now, though, he decided to let the matter drop. Clara eventually returned her attention to him, apologizing once more for the mix-up and promising to arrange alternative accommodations immediately. As Leavitt followed a bellhop to his new room, a smaller suite on a lower floor, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story than met the eye. Clara's actions had been impulsive, perhaps even reckless, but her casual mention of her husband hinted at connections far beyond the scope of a typical receptionist's role. Little did Leavitt know the tangled web of relationships and power dynamics within the Grandview Hotel was about to unravel further, and he was right at the center of it. Back at the front desk, Clara watched Leavitt disappear down the hallway, guilt gnawing at the edges of her conscience. She had acted out of conviction, believing she was making the right call, but now doubt crept in. Had she overstepped her bounds? Was she truly as progressive and fair-minded as she claimed to be? These questions swirled in her mind as the lobby buzzed around her, oblivious to the quiet turmoil brewing beneath the surface. The next morning, the Grandview Hotel was alive with its usual bustle. Guests milled about in the lobby, some heading out for meetings while others lingered over coffee in the lounge area. Clara arrived at her desk bright and early, ready to tackle another day of work. She had pushed the events of the previous evening to the back of her mind, convincing herself that she had done what was necessary under the circumstances. After all, accommodating Robert De Niro wasn't just good for the hotel's reputation. It was practically a no-brainer. Surely Leavitt would understand once he cooled off. But as she settled into her chair and began sorting through emails, a shadow fell across her desk. Looking up, she saw Ethan standing there, his tall frame exuding an air of quiet authority. Ethan was not a man who made frequent appearances at the hotel. His role as CEO of a major tech company kept him busy with board meetings, product launches, and international travel. Yet here he was, dressed impeccably in a navy blue suit, his piercing gray eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made Clara sit up straighter. "Morning, Clara," he said, his tone neutral, but carrying an undertone of seriousness that immediately set her on edge. "Do you have a moment? There's something I'd like to discuss." Clara nodded, forcing a smile despite the unease creeping into her chest. "Of course, Ethan. What's on your mind?" He gestured toward the manager's office tucked discreetly behind the front desk. "Let's talk in private." As they walked, side by side down the corridor, Clara's mind raced. Why was Ethan here? And why did he look so stern? Normally, their interactions were light-hearted and affectionate, filled with playful banter or updates about their respective days. This felt different, formal, almost clinical. Her stomach churned as she followed him into the office, closing the door softly behind them. Ethan took a seat behind the desk, motioning for Clara to do the same. For a moment he simply stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then, without preamble, he said, "I heard about the incident with Mr. Leavitt last night." Clara froze, her heart skipping a beat. How could he possibly know? Had Leavitt complained directly to management? Or worse, had someone else witnessed their exchange and reported it? She opened her mouth to respond, but Ethan held up a hand, silencing her before she could speak. "Before you say anything, let me clarify. I didn't hear this from staff or guests. Mr. Leavitt mentioned it himself when we spoke briefly at the charity gala last night." He paused, allowing the weight of his words to sink in. "Apparently, you canceled his reservation to accommodate Robert De Niro. Is that correct?" Clara swallowed hard, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "Yes, that's true, but Ethan, please let me explain. It was a last-minute request, and De Niro is, well, he's a legend. I thought it was the right decision under the circumstances." Ethan leaned back in his chair, folding his arms across his chest. His gaze remained steady, though his jaw tightened ever so slightly. "The right decision? Clara, do you realize how problematic that choice was, not just for Mr. Leavitt, but for the hotel as a whole?" She blinked, caught off guard by his sharp tone. "Problematic? I don't understand. Isn't it standard practice to prioritize high-profile clients? We've done it before with other celebrities." "That's not the point," Ethan replied, firmly. "Yes, hosting someone like De Niro can generate publicity, but at what cost? You violated one of the most fundamental principles of hospitality, treating every guest equally, regardless of who they are. When people book a room at our hotel, they trust us to honor that commitment. Breaking that trust damages our reputation, far more than any celebrity endorsement could repair." Clara shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her earlier confidence crumbling under the weight of his critique. "But Ethan, I was only trying to help. De Niro's team reached out directly. They needed a room urgently. What was I supposed to do? You should have come to me, or at least consulted with senior management, before making such a drastic decision," he said, his voice firm but measured. "Canceling a confirmed reservation without proper authorization isn't just unprofessional. It's disrespectful to the guest, and frankly, it reflects poorly on the entire organization." His words hit Clara like a punch to the gut. She had always prided herself on being independent and decisive, qualities she believed made her an asset to the team. Now, those same traits were being called into question, exposing flaws she hadn't recognized before. The realization stung deeply, leaving her unsure of how to defend herself. I didn't think of it that way," she admitted quietly, avoiding his gaze. "I just wanted to do what was best for the hotel." Ethan sighed, leaning forward slightly to soften his demeanor. "I understand your intentions, Clara, but good intentions aren't enough if they lead to poor outcomes. This situation has highlighted a broader issue, the need for clear guidelines and accountability when handling special requests. Moving forward, we'll be implementing stricter protocols to prevent something like this from happening again." Clara nodded slowly, still processing everything he had said. Though his tone remained professional, she couldn't help but feel a pang of shame. She had acted impulsively, driven by excitement and a desire to impress, only to discover that her actions had caused harm instead. For the first time in years, she found herself questioning whether she truly embodied the values she claimed to champion. After a long pause, Ethan added, "There's one more thing. Mr. Leavitt happens to be a long-standing client of ours, a reliable and valued guest. He travels here annually, always books in advance, and consistently leaves positive feedback. Losing his trust because of a careless mistake isn't something we can afford." The mention of Leavitt struck a nerve. Clara remembered the calm yet disappointed look in his eyes as he confronted her the previous evening. At the time, she had dismissed his reaction as overly dramatic, but now she understood why he had been so upset. To him, she represented the hotel, an institution he trusted, and her actions had betrayed that trust. "I see," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "What should I do now?" Ethan studied her for a moment, his expression softening slightly. "Apologize sincerely. Not just to Mr. Leavitt, but also to the rest of the staff. Use this experience as a learning opportunity. Mistakes happen, but owning up to them and making amends is what separates professionalism from recklessness." Clara nodded again, determination replacing her earlier defensiveness. She knew apologizing wouldn't erase what had happened, but it was a start, a chance to rebuild trust and demonstrate growth. As Ethan stood to leave, he placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You're capable of great things, Clara," he said gently. "Just remember, leadership isn't about making decisions based on ego or excitement. It's about considering the bigger picture and acting with integrity. I believe in you, but you need to hold yourself accountable too." With that, he exited the office, leaving Clara alone with her thoughts. The room felt unusually quiet, the hum of activity from the lobby muffled behind closed doors. She sat there for several minutes, replaying the conversation in her mind. Each word Ethan had spoken echoed like a reminder of the gap between her ideals and her actions. For the first time in a long while, Clara allowed herself to reflect honestly on her behavior. She realized that her progressive values, which she often touted proudly, had been overshadowed by arrogance and impulsivity. She had judged Leavitt unfairly, assuming his importance paled in comparison to Niro's. In doing so, she had failed to treat him with the dignity and respect he deserved. As she rose from her chair and stepped back into the bustling lobby, Clara resolved to make things right, not just for Leavitt but for herself. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she was determined to learn from her mistakes and grow into the person she aspired to be. Little did she know, her journey toward redemption was only beginning. The following morning, Clara arrived at the Grandview Hotel earlier than usual. She had spent most of the night replaying her conversation with Ethan in her mind, dissecting every word he had said and reflecting on her actions. For once, she wasn't focused on her appearance or picking out a colorful scarf to match her outfit. Instead, she wore a simple blouse and slacks, her demeanor subdued but resolute. Today was about making amends, not making an impression. As she walked through the lobby, she noticed Leavitt sitting in one of the lounge chairs near the windows. He was sipping coffee and reading a newspaper, his posture relaxed but deliberate. Clara hesitated for a moment, taking a deep breath to steady her nerves. She knew this wouldn't be easy. Apologizing never was. But it was necessary. And with determination, she approached him, her steps soft yet purposeful. "Good morning, Mr. Leavitt," she began, her voice gentle but clear. "May I have a moment of your time?" Leavitt lowered his newspaper, his expression neutral as he regarded her. There was no trace of anger in his eyes, but neither was there warmth. He simply nodded, gesturing for her to sit in the chair opposite him. Clara took a seat, clasping her hands tightly in her lap to keep them from trembling. "I wanted to speak with you about what happened yesterday," she continued, choosing her words carefully. "First and foremost, I want to apologize, sincerely, for canceling your reservation without consulting you. It was unfair, disrespectful, and entirely my fault. I acted impulsively, thinking I was doing the right thing, but I failed to consider how my decision would affect you." Leavitt listened silently, his gaze unwavering. When she paused, he set his coffee cup down and leaned back slightly, studying her with a thoughtful expression. "Go on," he said simply. Clara swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his scrutiny. "I realize now that I treated you unfairly. You trusted us to honor your booking, and I broke that trust. That's unacceptable, especially for someone who has been a loyal guest of this hotel for years. I'm truly sorry for the inconvenience and frustration I caused you." For a long moment, Leavitt didn't respond. The silence stretched between them, heavy and palpable. Clara resisted the urge to fidget, forcing herself to maintain eye contact despite the discomfort. Finally, he spoke, his tone calm but measured. "You're right. It was frustrating," he admitted. "But more than that, it was disappointing. When I make plans, I expect them to be followed through. Your actions made me feel like my needs didn't matter, because someone else seemed more important." His words stung, but Clara nodded, accepting the truth in them. "You're absolutely right, and I can't blame you for feeling that way. I let my excitement cloud my judgment, and in doing so, I dismissed your value as a guest. That was wrong of me, and I deeply regret it." Leavitt studied her for another moment, then sighed softly. "Apology accepted," he said finally. "But I hope you understand why this situation upset me. It's not just about the room, it's about respect and fairness. Those are principles everyone should uphold regardless of their role." Clara nodded earnestly. "I do understand, and I promise you that I'll learn from this experience. I've already spoken with management about implementing better protocols to ensure something like this doesn't happen again." "That's good to hear," Leavitt replied, his tone softening slightly. "Thank you for addressing the issue directly. Not everyone would take the time to do that." Relief washed over Clara, though she knew her work wasn't done. "Is there anything else I can do to make this right? Perhaps upgrading your accommodations or offering some other form of compensation?" Leavitt shook his head, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "No need. Just knowing that you've acknowledged the mistake and are working to prevent it in the future is enough for me. Though," he paused, his smile widening slightly, "if you could point me toward the best spot in the hotel to watch the sunset, I'd appreciate it. That's one of the reasons I always request a west-facing room." Clara chuckled nervously, grateful for the lighter tone. "Absolutely. The rooftop terrace is perfect for sunsets. You'll have an unobstructed view of the skyline. I'll make sure you have access whenever you'd like." "Thank you," Leavitt said, standing up and extending his hand. "I appreciate your honesty and effort to resolve this. Let's move forward." Clara stood as well, shaking his hand firmly. "Thank you for giving me the chance to make things right. I won't forget this experience, or the lessons it taught me." With that, they parted ways, Leavitt returning to his newspaper and Clara heading back to the front desk. Though their interaction had been brief, it left her feeling both humbled and hopeful. For the first time since the incident, she felt like she was on the path to redemption. Later that day, Ethan gathered the hotel staff for a meeting in the conference room. It was rare for him to address the team personally, so the atmosphere buzzed with curiosity as everyone filed in and took their seats. Clara sat near the front, her stomach fluttering with nervous anticipation. She knew this meeting would focus on the recent events, and while she dreaded revisiting the topic, she understood its importance. Once everyone was settled, Ethan stepped to the podium, his presence commanding attention. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice warm but authoritative. "Today, we're going to discuss an incident that occurred earlier this week, one that highlights the importance of accountability and professionalism in our industry." He went on to explain what had happened, framing it as a teachable moment rather than a personal attack on Clara. "When we prioritize certain guests over others based on subjective criteria, we risk undermining the trust our clients place in us. Every single person who walks through those doors deserves to be treated with dignity and respect, regardless of their status or fame." The room fell silent as Ethan emphasized the need for clear communication and adherence to protocol when handling special requests. He announced the implementation of new guidelines designed to prevent similar situations in the future, including mandatory approval from senior management for any changes to confirmed reservations. When he finished speaking, Ethan turned to Clara, nodding slightly to signal her to say a few words. Her heart raced as she stood up, acutely aware of the dozens of eyes watching her. Taking a deep breath, she addressed her colleagues. "I made a mistake," she admitted, her voice steady despite her nerves. "In trying to accommodate a high-profile guest, I neglected the rights and expectations of another, a loyal customer who trusted us to honor his booking. I'm deeply sorry for the disruption this caused, and I'm committed to learning from this experience. Moving forward, I'll strive to embody the values we all share: fairness, integrity, and respect for every individual." Her words were met with quiet nods and murmurs of understanding. While some may have harbored lingering doubts, most recognized the sincerity in her apology and appreciated her willingness to own up to her error. That evening, as Clara prepared to leave the hotel, she found herself lingering in the lobby, watching as guests checked in and out. The day had been emotionally taxing but also transformative. She realized that true progress wasn't about perfection, it was about growth. By acknowledging her mistakes and committing to change, she was taking the first step toward becoming the person she aspired to be. As she stepped outside into the cool night air, Clara glanced back at the glowing facade of the Grandview Hotel. It remained a symbol of elegance and sophistication, but now it represented something more personal, a place where she had stumbled, learned, and begun anew. And though challenges undoubtedly lay ahead, she faced them with renewed purpose and resolve. In the days that followed, Clara found herself reflecting deeply on the lessons she had learned. The incident with Leavitt and the subsequent conversations with Ethan and her colleagues had left an indelible mark on her. For years, she had prided herself on being progressive, outspoken, and forward-thinking, qualities she believed made her a force for good in both her personal and professional life. But now, she saw how those traits could sometimes veer into arrogance or impulsiveness. If not tempered by empathy and accountability, it was a humbling realization, one that forced her to reevaluate not just her actions but also her motivations. At work, Clara threw herself into implementing the new protocols Ethan had introduced. She took charge of training sessions for the front desk staff, walking them through the updated procedures and emphasizing the importance of treating every guest equally. Her enthusiasm for these changes surprised even herself. Where once she might have dismissed such measures as overly rigid or unnecessary, she now understood their value in fostering trust and consistency. As she guided her co-workers through the process, she noticed a shift in their attitudes too. They seemed more engaged, more mindful of the impact their decisions could have on others. Her interactions with guests also began to change. Gone were the days when she would prioritize certain individuals based on fame, wealth, or perceived importance. Instead, she approached each person with genuine warmth and attentiveness, striving to create meaningful connections rather than superficial impressions. Guests responded positively to this newfound sincerity, leaving glowing reviews about the exceptional service they received at the Grandview Hotel. Even Robert, De Niro's team, sent a thank you note praising Clara's professionalism during his stay, a small irony that didn't escape her notice. Meanwhile, Leavitt returned home to Ohio after completing his business trip. Though he had initially been frustrated by the mix-up, his experience at the hotel ultimately left him with a sense of satisfaction. Clara's apology had been heartfelt and sincere, and the steps taken to prevent similar incidents reassured him that the hotel valued its guests' trust above all else. He wrote a detailed review online, highlighting the hotel's commitment to resolving issues promptly and respectfully. His words resonated with readers, earning the Grandview Hotel praise from travelers who appreciated seeing accountability in action. When Ethan read Leavitt's review, he couldn't help but smile. Not only had the situation been resolved amicably, but it had also strengthened the hotel's reputation. More importantly, it had served as a catalyst for positive change within the organization. Inspired by the outcome, Ethan decided to expand the initiative beyond the front desk, introducing workshops on leadership, communication, and conflict resolution for employees across all departments. These programs quickly became a cornerstone of the hotel's culture, reinforcing the idea that success wasn't just about profits, it was about people. For Clara, the weeks following the incident marked a period of profound growth. She realized that her passion for equality and fairness, while admirable, needed to be grounded in action rather than rhetoric. At first, she struggled with self-doubt, questioning whether she truly deserved forgiveness for her mistake. But over time, she came to see that true progress wasn't about erasing past errors. It was about using them as stepping stones toward improvement. She started volunteering for community outreach programs organized by the hotel, mentoring young professionals and sharing her experiences openly. Her vulnerability inspired others to reflect on their own behaviors, creating a ripple effect of introspection and growth throughout the team. One evening, as Clara sat in the hotel lounge after a long day, Ethan joined her unexpectedly. He ordered 2 cups of tea and slid one across the table to her before taking a seat. "How are you holding up?" he asked, his tone warm and supportive. Clara smiled faintly, wrapping her hands around the teacup. "Better, I think. It hasn't been easy, but I feel like I'm learning, not just about hospitality, but about myself." Ethan nodded approvingly. "That's what matters most. Growth isn't always comfortable, but it's always worth it. You've handled this situation with grace and maturity, and I'm proud of you." His words brought tears to her eyes, though she blinked them away quickly. "Thank you, Ethan. I couldn't have done it without your guidance, or without people like Mr. Leavitt reminding me why humility is so important." They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching as the lobby lights dimmed slightly to signal the end of another busy day. Outside, the city pulsed with energy, its streets alive with stories waiting to unfold. Inside the Grandview Hotel, however, there was a quiet sense of renewal, a shared understanding among the staff that challenges, no matter how daunting, could be overcome with integrity and teamwork. As the months passed, the Grandview Hotel continued to thrive, its reputation bolstered by the dedication of its employees. Clara remained at the heart of this transformation, embodying the values she had once only preached. She became known not just for her colorful scarves and lively personality, but also for her unwavering commitment to fairness and respect. Guests often remarked on how she went out of her way to make them feel valued, whether by remembering their names or offering thoughtful recommendations for local attractions. Leavitt, too, became a regular fixture at the hotel, returning annually for his business trips and occasionally bringing his wife along for leisure stays. Each visit felt like coming home, thanks in large part to Clara's efforts to ensure his comfort and satisfaction. Their relationship evolved from one of tension to mutual admiration, built on a foundation of honesty and understanding. And so, what began as a simple misunderstanding blossomed into something far greater, a testament to the power of reflection, accountability, and redemption. The Grandview Hotel stood as a symbol of resilience, proving that even the most unexpected challenges could lead to meaningful change. For Clara, Leavitt, Ethan, and everyone involved, the experience served as a reminder that growth often starts with discomfort, but it always ends with possibility.